So at this time, I'd like to invite the panel members to come up. We've got Cisco Vicente from CDRH, Kim Kaplan from the Cmmi Institute, Rob Becker from Edwards, and Greg Waldrip from MITRE. So thank you. So some of the panel members have a brief presentation that they'll provide, and then after the presentations, we'll go into, we have some questions that we'll pose to the panel, and then, you know, if there's some conversation or dialogue or a little Q&A from the audience, the members, that would be fantastic. Can everyone see okay? Can you see the? Is anybody missing? Yeah? All right. All right, we're good. Okay. Kim, do you want to go ahead and start? Yeah. Okay. Perfect. You got it. Thanks.
You can sit, Rob. It's fine. Okay. All right. Hi, everyone. I think most of you know me. I'm Kim Kaplan, the program manager at Cmmi Institute, supporting the Case for Quality Voluntary Improvement Program initiative. So most of you already know what this is, but brief summary, it is a collaborative program between FDA CDRH, MDIC, Cmmi Institute, and the medical device industry. This was developed with the intention to elevate medical device stakeholders from the established standard of regulatory compliance to advancing medical device quality and safety through sustained and predictive practices that achieve better patient outcomes. This program uses the Cmmi framework as a model and method by which medical device manufacturers can also measure their capability to produce high-quality devices. And we have these goals of helping to reduce defects and rework, costs, accelerating time to market of innovative products, and increasing patient safety. So there are a couple of ways that we have identified how we measure success in the pilot. We're looking at consistency and scalability, which we're calling program adoption. These are things like how our operations performed consistently to support the growing scalability of new participants. So we're looking at things like how many appraisals are we able to complete, what's the wait time, how many appraisers are trained in the program, things of that nature. We're also looking at how this pilot continues to provide value to participants. We're calling this program effectiveness, and this is looking at things like our survey results, participant feedback, appraiser feedback, FDA feedback. We're looking at all of these various channels of feedback and incorporating lessons learned. And then long term, we're looking to continue to elevate the industry by enabling organizations to trend their results and their performance metrics over time. So to date, at least as of the time these slides were made earlier this week, we had 70 actively enrolled facilities representing 30 distinct companies. We've completed 93 appraisals throughout the duration of this pilot, with 8 of those year to date. The average time from enrollment to completing the appraisal is 113 days. Year over year, we're seeing that average about 377 days, which is right around the 1-year mark as our goal. We have 26 appraisers currently certified to deliver services in this program, with another 25 going through the vetting, training, onboarding process. We've also trained a number of internal appraisal team members, and that means people from within industry, so that organizations have someone or multiple people within their organization that understand the model, can participate in the appraisal, better understand the results to drive improvement. So we've trained 62 of those participants so far, and 25 FDA staff as well, so that they can join these appraisals as well and see what kind of information we're looking at. Oh, actually, I do want to talk about this piece to the right here. So just some quick stats on the distribution of the enrolled facilities. I can read it more easily here. Right now, 26% of sites are part of a multi-site appraisal. This is when we're able to look at more than one facility, maybe as part of a value stream. 7% of sites are recognized by FDA as a small business. 34% of our sites are internationally located. You can see this distribution of how many are manufacturing Class 1, Class 2, Class 3, or some combination. But you can see that the majority of participants have Class 2 and Class 3 devices. In terms of program effectiveness, this is largely coming from our post-appraisal survey. So after every appraisal, we survey the participants to understand what kind of value they received, what their experience was like. So for 2019, we had 248 respondents, 130 from baseline appraisals or year one, and 118 from organizations going through reappraisals, which could be a year 2 or a year 3. So overall, large percentage of positive experience, 93%. 85% believed that the appraisal identified opportunities that could directly and positively impact product quality. 95% saw no conflict with compliance, in fact, that it was complementary. And 99% believe that the appraisal had other value add to their organization beyond the direct improvement to product quality. We also measure the Net Promoter Score, which asks on a scale of 0 to 10, how likely are you to recommend this program to a colleague? 9 and 10 are considered promoters, 7 and 8 are considered neutral, and 6 and below are considered detractors. You can actually see the distribution of detractors being red, neutral being orange, and promoters being green. So on a scale of negative 100 to positive 100, we are at positive 60 for 2019. We also ask organizations how they might want to become more involved in the future. You can see that the 2 largest buckets here of the responses are that they would encourage other facilities to participate and that they will continue to leverage their appraisers' expertise to drive those improvements within their organization. I do want to keep this brief because I want to give our panel time. But I also want to talk briefly about some of the themes that we're seeing as we're asking organizations that have gone through reappraisals what kind of impact to product quality that they've seen. So there are 3 main buckets. This first one is around communication, which I think is one of the most challenging things for us to do as people, to communicate with one another effectively. And so some of the things that we're seeing is that organizations have a better understanding of what product quality is across their organization and how to produce it with new ideas and different perspectives. They're seeing common language across their teams, improved communication, standardized reporting metrics, and better understanding of those measurement systems and how to track those mechanisms that support accountability against those measures, better sharing of information across R&D, operations, quality assurance, and regulatory assurance, better access between departments in terms of getting the right people together to solve various problems, aligned objectives as an entire company, and a predictable communication pathway for escalating faster resolution of needs. Another bucket we saw was the shift from being reactive to being proactive and even predictive. So identifying pathways towards anticipating and preventing delays in non-conforming products, making corrections before the error becomes a non-conformity, earlier identification of potential issues, taking action earlier before the impact, increased rigor and predictability around new product development, risk mitigation, increased rigor around training, understanding processes, agility in decision-making, those sorts of things. And the final bucket was largely around culture. So organizations seeing more focus on a continuous improvement culture, shifting from a startup culture mentality to a more mature company, a greater sense of overall direction, the pursuit of systemic changes rather than just addressing the problem at hand, tackling projects that have lasting benefits, shifting from tactical thinking to strategic thinking, increased customer satisfaction, holistic views of the organization, and the recognition that every individual contributes to quality, not just their quality department. All right, thank you, and we'll turn it over to the next. Thank you. I'll be speaking to some more details later on in today's conversation.
Next we have Cisco, right?
No, not the, not together, not the, right now. It was 23. Oh, actually, don't worry about it.
You sure?
Yeah, don't worry about it. So just to talk things, so one of the things I wanted to do is just to give everybody a quick update, because we'll have further opportunities to discuss within the panel and maybe answer questions and get a little bit more to it. Oh, there we go. So you're going to get all that work, and you got that one slide coming up. Just a quick detail on what we're working towards from a VIP standpoint, right? It was really about that operationalization of the program, right, this year. That's what we're really trying to get through and get done. It involves a lot of the work that the NDAC community has been doing. You know, we've got the governance, we've got the board ratification. One of the things that has come up, given the way it's structured and it's worked, and this is something that I think is being factored and considered, with the idea of building this out as a collaborative community, which is something that the center as a whole has been trying to leverage and engage, because it gives us a little bit more of the opportunity to participate, engage a little bit more of the speed, and let the broader, or Adrian, ecosystem take ownership of the of what's going on within the oversight, the basically the integrity and what's happening within the product quality space for the medical device activities. MITRE has, and we had worked with them to help deliver a lot of their learning. You know, they do this a lot. They've done this before successfully. We've heard some of that in the last couple of days, and you'll hear more about that throughout the later sessions today, so I won't spend a lot of time there. But they helped pull together a concept of operations that kind of incorporates all the things that we may have missed when we were thinking through this originally, lessons learned that they've had, and now it's time to bring that all together, find out where we are from our standpoint in developing the third-party activities here that we've got happening, and what are the additional gaps that we should kind of close out in the course of this year to make this something that is really running at least smoothly once we go into an operational state. The other piece of that involves more of the FDA side, which is our internal work, right? We have to make a public policy announcement, basically, that goes around with this. You know, we say, hey, here's how this works, here's how FDA is engaging, here's how we're touching base with this external body and this activity, here's how we're using that information, here's what you can expect, so on and so forth. So we've been working and taking a lot of the original structure that was put together from the pilot that we ran, using that as the base, taking whatever lessons we've learned over the course of the year and kind of incorporating them in and build it in right from the get-go now, getting our internal buy-in and participation and feedback so that they're aware, they've had a chance to voice it, either, you know, voice concerns that we can address, or get an opportunity to at least voice the concern and figure out a way to address that later and why we're moving in this direction now. And then the next course of that was actually going through the whole internal review, clearance, and publication process of public comment periods that go on with that, and what the best mechanism to deliver that policy kind of announcement and statement is. Our goal and what we are trying to work for is to get that public announcement out, here's how it's working, by the end of the calendar year in 2020. That's still the goal. Now, there's a lot going on that could shift the dynamic on that, but that is still something we are working towards, and I think at least the work that's being done here in the VIP community and MDIC are driving towards getting some of the pieces that would need to be living externally to describe how the program operates from a general case of quality here and MDIC VIP standpoint, up and running also to kind of align with that announcement piece. So just to give you a heads up, that's where we are. We've got some of our internal process and program activities moving. There's a lot of other activities that are involved with this, but this is the big one to get this off the ground. If we can get that announcement started, it becomes very easy to start building in some of these other factors and some of the other activities as we move forward. With that, I will turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Cisco. Thanks. That's a good segue into some panel questions that hopefully will get some discussion going. That would be great. Let's see. So I'm just going to leave that in the background, and I'm going to go into the questions instead of trying to get out. So actually, I think that's a great segue to a question. I think I'll start with you, Cisco. So what, in your mind, and anybody else on the panel who wants to add, what would you see the difference between the pilot that we just successfully accomplished and the program?
So that stays on, perfect. So one, I think the big key points that I know I've heard from industry is the concern and fear of, does this go away if there's a new administration? Well, the one thing that really makes a difference when we make that announcement is it's now official policy, right? It doesn't go away. We've got a way to interact and adjust. The other thing that it does is it takes us from a little bit of the, it's not an ad hoc cycle, but we were in iterative stages. We were learning, we were trying to adjust and accommodate things on our end, learn from what was going on externally, what we thought was working and what didn't work, and how do we adjust to correct that. It takes that now, and we put a little bit more formal structure around it, that here's the final learning. We're at a stable enough point to say we can convey this information out there so that there isn't a lot of confusion. Sometimes people are working off what they saw was an older iteration of expectations, and this says, okay, here's the fixed one, here's where you can find the fixed ones. So that actually provides a little bit more stability externally. The other piece of this is something we get a question a lot about is guidances, right? This gives us something to start. If we need to start developing some additional external guidance out, now we have a program that we can reference, right? It's a little difficult to justify when you're talking about pilots. So that changes that portion. And the last piece is the internal dynamic, right? Now we have an official statement, we've got an official policy we're working towards. It allows us to go into better, more stable processes, more consistent training, more broad adoption within the organization. So that's the main activities. What we talk about from an operations standpoint, we're trying to keep the feel as much the same as it was beforehand, but it does give us the kind of the impetus to make it more structured and contained.
Thank you. I'll pause for just a minute or two if there's a question or anything or comment. No?
I do want to just echo Cisco's sentiment and say that from the Institute's perspective, we're also hoping to be able to have some of the more documented descriptions and supporting information for participants published and more easily accessible, so that as organizations are going through this process, they can read those pieces of information and get the most value out of this program based on what we've learned. Additionally, I think we're hoping to incorporate some systems to help with scalability and ease of access to individual organizations' information.
Thank you, Kim. Anybody else? Rob?
Yeah, I was just going to add that, for us, there's a big change when we transition to a program. Right now, the pilot is pretty specific on a profile for a site that would need to be enrolled. And as we are expanding and building some additional facilities, it allows us to include those not only in the program, but also those facilities are generally set up to have relationships with existing facilities. And so we can start to do multi-tier or multi-site assessments with sites that are going to be working together, share joint production and a lot of common goals.
Thank you, Rob. I think a great question would be, and I think I'll start with Rob, and then we can work down the panel on this question. What are the long-term goals of VIP as a program, beyond where we're at today?
For me, I guess the first goal is to understand how to scale it up and make sure that we're anticipating and ahead of the, kind of the industry adoption, and that we're able to provide the service level and have the capacity to bring this out. really the biggest thing with industry participants is, if they're not able to get the access, surface level that they want, it's gonna create, a disincentive to feel like it's a well-run, real program. So I think that's probably number one. And then the second is just continue to have a forum where we can learn and where participants can share good experiences, bad experiences, how to evolve it, so that we can continue to make sure it's effective and it's achieving the right outcomes for all participants.
Yeah.
How's that? Is that better?
Oh, wow.
Do you want me to repeat all that?
Does anybody want to add?
So just maybe to get some understanding, clarity, how, when we're talking about the long-term goals, how long-term visionary are you looking at to be? Are we looking at strategic foresight activities, or are we looking at just from a program operating standpoint?
Program operating standpoint.
I want to make sure.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a couple of things that I think we're looking to make sure we see moving forward, right? It's the program was intended to help build and focus on maybe the set of areas or the high impact activities that we could collaboratively working towards to drive the improvement efforts. Once the program is announced, official, off the ground, I think one of the big goals would be how do we move into the next value spaces to help improve the, where the areas of concerns are in quality around the board. I still think back to the original comments that I think Abamed gave us, when we first announced the program, and it was a valid, comment where we know that there's a lot of issues that occur because they may be design related. Why aren't we targeting that? And, it was a decision because that's a lot harder. And we still need to prove some things out with regard to this program, iterate and learn. Driving the expansion to that would be great. That would be a long-term goal. The other piece of this is to see this be something that continues to be established and run as a collaboration, where there is the stakeholder ownership and movement of the activities, to continue to get that commitment and bring in the other relevant stakeholders to help drive some of the other changes that might be needed, or some of the other efforts that are relevant to, I think, the medical device quality that's expected or what we're trying to move towards. It is a situation where we've seen some of the examples given to us. We saw even demonstrated with some of the work of these public-private partnerships that exist in other areas. The collaboration works. It targets bigger issues. It actually delivers on sometimes faster resolution, faster and more effective resolution of issues when that community is involved, when the right stakeholders and the experts within the industry are able to adjust things, and it isn't so dependent on us as an agency to provide guidance for, as was demonstrated as a rulemaking, right, which is even harder. So it's a way that, measuring and tracking that this community is effectively doing and driving those right focus points, I think would be a long-term goal for the VIP program.
Thank you, Cisco.
I mean, I think Cisco and Joe pretty much said it all, and I'm not sure how long-term we're thinking, but I agree that being able to bring in more of the healthcare ecosystem would be a great next step at some point. I think aspirationally, we do want to eventually be able to connect the information we're seeing and connect that with patients and providers. And so bringing in their voice somewhere down the line, I think, is one of the goals of this program in the near long term. And there's something else you said that I also want to add. I think just the inclusion of having access to systems that can help us analyze the data that we're seeing more broadly means that we want to accelerate the number of participants that are in this program so that we can start seeing more broad themes and trends.
Yeah, hi. This is Ravi from Illumina. I'm also on the CFQ steering committee. And I had a question for the panel. First of all, I think, we made great strides, right, in getting this collaborative community to come together and do really good things. And Illumina now has 3 sites enlisted in the program. And had it not been for the coronavirus situation, we'd have already gone through yet another appraisal, which we had to push out because of Singapore, and then we may have to push out a 3rd one that's on the West Coast. But we'll get to it. The question I have is, so far, we've done a great job of operationalizing, at least starting to operationalize, the pilot and really make it meaningful externally. I'm also sort of faced with operationalizing this internally, in the sense that when there's appraisals, and there is a question at the end of it, so I'm going to be precise, concise. But just want to make sure the background is understood. So I've been participating, and I'm really excited and passionate about how we've been operating this externally. What I'm now trying to get my hands around is how to operationalize this internally to the company, which means not just focusing on appraisals when they come up, and not just having the quarterlies, but to get the movement going within the company at an awareness level that will then drive activity in between appraisals and in between report outs that will actually raise the maturity across the company. And so the question is, can we think about something, maybe an awareness package, maybe something that would be educationally informative and make senior management as well as, the rank and file aware of what needs to be done to get to where we are aspirationally wanting to go in terms of the foundational practice areas.
Okay. Sure. Greg Walsh from MITRE. I think there's a why MITRE question coming up, so I guess I'll jump in now. One of the things I think for the governance of VIP really is to start to think strategically about what needs to happen next. You have a good foundation, you have a program that's offering value. The question is, do you grow horizontally, bring in more sites? Do you think about enriching the experience? So I don't have a direct answer to you. I think it's a strategic one that the steering committee, the governance committee needs to address, and then decide where do you want to put your resources, where do you want to put your focus. So I think it's a governance question as much as anything about how you want to grow and where to grow the program.
I agree with Greg that this is something we need to consider long-term and strategically. But I think in the short term, some of the things that we're looking to do to help support exactly what you're describing, I didn't get to show it in my slides because I wanted to keep it brief, but that is in terms of the theme we're seeing around people who are struggling to see changes happening in their organization. It often comes from getting buy-in from senior leadership or corporate structures to get the support and resources that they need to do the work on their specific location. And so one of the things we're looking to do is to start publishing some case studies around the value proposition that organizations are seeing internally when they make these changes, so that individuals such as yourself can bring that up to leadership and start sharing the value. I think we want to make this a value-driven conversation. Additionally, we are hiring folks with a specific role of helping support organizations with their own internal strategies and where they want to go and what they want to see out of this and how they can make the most out of this program. So in fact, one of our relationship people are here right now, Victoria Smith, over here at this table.
So I think one more set of notes to that, because I think that was something that was always a initial concern when we even developed the pilot, right? The idea of having these quarterly check-ins and trying to get these metrics to help drive at least the visibility into that sustainment. That was part of that intent. Now, we do know it's going to take a while to kind of balance that out, to develop the right trust to get there. So from an FDA standpoint, I think we are trying to really demonstrate that we're committed to the process and we're willing to allow that kind of growth to happen. That doesn't mean that, you know, we're not at risk collectively if the situation is where somebody's engaging and these mechanisms aren't working. What I think we have an opportunity to do here, and I cannot stress it enough with regards to the whole construct of this co-created collaborative community, is you don't want FDA to be your solution for that, right? I like the idea of value, but the whole purpose of this is, can you find an alternative way to drive that incentive, whether it is better case studies, whether it is other information, whether it is, you know, other benchmarking or other activities that can happen across the board. The minute we have to say, this is how our expectations are, this is what you must do, that turns into a compliance activity and you won't get the same result either. So this is, again, and trust me, it's just as hard on our side from an FDA standpoint to say, we want to collaborate and trust the system to work. I think we really do need then the same in terms of collaboration to find the right solutions for some of those problems. So it's not just us having to say, all right, we're just going to set a line in the sand and this is what we're expecting.
Thank you. Is this on? I just really wanted to play with the microphone. So tell me if I'm misunderstanding. It seems like to get real traction organization-wide, beyond the people who are dedicated to Case for Quality and its projects because they're a good idea, we need to show that there are real benefits to companies in terms of cost savings, better experiences with regulators, the ability to produce higher quality products, so that there are real business values that are derived from participating in Case for Quality. Is that a correct hypothesis in your collective views? And if so, where are we in terms of being able to substantiate that argument? Do we need to do, let me put it differently, do we have successes that we feel confident reporting? Do we need more time to generate additional successes? What's going to be the lever that we use to create change in that context?
So I think, and this, I'll start out with our initial response. That, I think, is going to be the most attention-getting piece of it, is those value cases, that value proposition. From a pilot standpoint, what we've done, we've seen successes, and we've tried to put that information out in aggregate and anonymized. Again, that only goes so far because it does not convey the same level of whether it is just that trust, like going back to the trust in government thing, the idea of, you know, are we really understanding the dynamic because we're not speaking from the same kind of business perspective as others. It's got a limited, you know, just capability to really move that needle. There are people out there who actually have shared some of that information with us. They've got great value cases. The question now becomes, how do they make that public, right? How do they get that mechanism going? That's, I think, where we'd look to maybe some of the collaboration, some of the community, and what's going on here to figure out how do we get those stories individually shared? How do we maybe connect those people with the internal other stakeholders, C-suites of the companies who are tepid or maybe curious, but not necessarily putting their foot in the water just yet? Because, again, we're going to only have a limited impact on being able to convey our pieces of that. Because even when we do share some of the information, if it's very specific to a company, there's a lot that we got to do to kind of turn that into something that is just here's a trend that we saw, or, you know, we don't want to share a lot of that information. We can't share a lot of information. So we'd really be looking to the community itself to say, okay, here's what I'm willing to step in and show, here's what the impact was.
I want to add, then you can go, Rob. I want to add that when we first started this pilot, we were looking at it on a facility by facility basis, because that's the way that FDA reviews these organizations. And so it wasn't until maybe 6 or 8 months into the pilot that we started seeing that organizations wanted to be able to look more broadly across their company. And so that's a shift that we've been making in this program. I think to the point about value creation and value add, we've heard a lot of anecdotal stories about the success, and we've seen that in the feedback as well. But when we started to do case studies in late 2018, early 2019, a lot of these organizations felt the changes, but didn't necessarily have the metrics or the data to back that up just yet because it was a little bit early. So we've revised our process for collecting these stories and gathering these case studies so that we could start to collect more of that quantitative data, and we're now restarting those conversations with organizations so that we can start capturing that and, with their permission, publishing that information.
So as a participant, certainly, you know, for us, there's really two aspects of it, because there's the tangible benefits where, you know, we have some change that went through faster, and there's a specific benefit from that, and we try and share those as you can, summarize them in a nice little case study. But I think the other thing that we can also share, and you know, with Kim as we message this, is there's a lot of intangible benefits that are cultural changes. As Kim pointed out in the beginning, communication is a big issue. So, you know, we've made a lot of investments in communication at the site, how the site interacts with each other, et cetera. Those are a little bit more harder to capture in a quantifiable way, but they are probably more important for us in terms of, you know, not only our participation, but the kind of changes we're making that we see substantial benefit in. And so it's a matter of trying to figure out how to capture those in a way that, you know, we can communicate and publish. But, you know, certainly, you know, we look to participate and try and help get that messaging out.
I think one of the opportunities too for increased value is expanding the stakeholders that have a say in the program development. So by having providers, payers, those other people, you begin to learn what is important to them, and they open up data streams that you may not have been access to. So what you may see as internal quality may not be the same as what the person who purchases your product sees as value. So I think that's a key to growing the program and leading to its sustainability.
I just wanted to echo what the question that Steve asked, and also you know, Rob's explanation. As a participant, so far, we see the tangible benefits. We've been in the program for about a year, and the tangible benefits that we've seen, I think, are just the tip of the iceberg. We've seen accelerated appraisals. We've certainly gone through a few of those. We've also seen, submissions, and we've also seen instances where we wouldn't, you know, go through routine inspections, and those have been viewed by the organization as tangible benefits. I'd like to understand what other tangible benefits we can actually quantify to make the value proposition, you know, more visible. And so if we can do something by way of either metrics or baselining, like to show that we've made an improvement, one's got to have some sort of a baseline at the time that one starts something, and then show over time that the things that we were measuring actually got better, whether it's recalls, whether it's incident reports, MDRs, whether it's just yield. I don't know, but I guess the question is, and also an appeal, we would obviously be competing with other programs such as operational excellence programs. So if we were to remove the benefits tomorrow, I'm not saying do this by any means, but it's bringing out a contrast. If we were to remove the benefits, then, you know, the competition between this program and other programs like Operational Excellence, Six Sigma, and things like that, Lean, would be in a very level playing field. Today it isn't, because the benefits that are offered greatly outweigh anything else has demonstrated, and so that's a big magnet. But I think going forward, I'm really trying to understand how can we, beyond what Rob said, you know, there's intangible benefits here, but can we make the tangible benefits go to be more than just those that are offered from a regulatory perspective? And anyone could take a comment on how we could achieve that would be very, very interesting to me, because that's where I want to go in terms of operationalizing the CMMI foundations.
So Ravi, let me, I guess, take a start at that. So I think what we found is to be successful, this program shouldn't be competing with some of the other things you mentioned. I think it's a matter of finding the space that this is an equal input into your strategic planning and how you think about your organization and how it operates and what your areas of opportunity are. And it should be part of those other inputs. I think those are the other things you mentioned, whether it's an operational maturity or Six Sigma, those all play a part. And I think none of them are more or less important. I think they all present a snapshot of the organization that's different and allow you inputs to help you figure out what your opportunities are to improve. And I think the more you start to think about it as a strategic input, then I think then it balances out and it makes sense in terms of the value it provides longer term.
Just to add to that, because I think the right way to look at it, right? One of the things that we also encountered at some companies was this idea of, now are we competing with their own internal operational excellence programs and models? This isn't that competition, right? Those models, whatever you're using, that's your tool for driving the improvement. This isn't about giving the company a different way to look at things and do things, right? Cmmi gives you a roadmap of, you know, what are tangible results or expectations that you'll see if your improvement is happening, right? This is what the output looks like. This is what you're looking for. It's your maturity or capability level. What we did and what we're looking to do on this program wasn't necessarily about giving a tool to industry. It was giving a tool to FDA to look at industry differently than what we've done beforehand. So it shouldn't be something that competes or replaces those efforts and activities. Use the right mechanism, use the right tool to drive what's relevant for your organization. This is the window we're using to help assess that is working for you or delivering the value you need for that. Because beforehand, we weren't even in that space, right? I go back to the idea of, you know, things that even we've heard and you know, people have quoted internally from FDA. If you're familiar with John Murray and some of the work he's done, it was always the idea of take credit for the good work you've done, right? This gives you a mechanism, this gives us a mechanism, basically, to understand the good work you're doing, which is different than, I think, the different modes and operating models beforehand. So I would say, going back, don't use this to force a shift if what the organization is doing is working and driving sense. This is really about us being able to see it in a different way.
And I think without being too specific, more tactically speaking to your question, Ravi, beyond, you know, we're getting changes through faster, we are seeing things coming out of performance reports and conversations we're having with people around things like increased production capacity, better on-time delivery, reduction in turnover rates, reduction in time to close complaints, things like that. So we are seeing other tangible benefits as well.
I think you'll hear more in the next session, but I think the participation in the program is just not just as a single facility, but as a program, that there may be things that can be learned that are systemic, right? And that can then be the next wave of services that are provided or technical assistance that's put out there. So that the idea is not just, I'm thinking of me, you know, I'm being part of a larger whole that can benefit the entire industry. And there are ways to look at that. And as I said, I think you'll learn more in the next session. But I think that's the value of not adding on. As Cisco said, you already have high quality improvement programs. You have a nice tool that's coming in and providing an objective view. It's can we as a community grow and be better?
Thank you, Nina. I want to give a chance for a question from the phone, and this will be the final question, and then we can have the panel answer that. Thank you.
Okay, this is Timo Jackal. Can you hear me?
Wow, yeah. Loud and clear.
All right. I'll not use the voice I used to yell at my kids. So this is, from a Bausch Health perspective, this is more of a commentary than a question. I remember at the last forum, companies acknowledging that the CMMI appraisal synchronized very well with their own internal enterprise excellence programs, especially those that were modeled after the Shingo model. So last year, we took several disjointed programs. Quality had a continuous improvement office, and operations had an operations excellence. And we consolidated all of that into an enterprise excellence program. We redid our internal appraisal process to very much follow the Shingo model. And then we went through our first CMMI appraisal in December of 2019. And this week, we're doing at that same facility our enterprise excellence appraisal. But we did it by being informed by the output of the CMMI appraisal. So we did a gap analysis against the two models and compared where there was a lot of overlap and where we felt there was a lot of opportunities to dig deeper. And so we have a very tailored enterprise excellence appraisal that'll be completed this week. And then we'll have a consolidated action plan that comes out of that by the end of the month. So we have taken the experience of going through our first MDDAP appraisal and used it to really tailor and strengthen our enterprise excellence program. And I think that's consistent with the report outs from other companies at the last forum.
So I would agree with that. I would say we are doing something similar in that as we learn and get further engagement, you know, for our company, as we get more sites, we have a site going and doing an appraisal right now. We have another site that's enrolled that will be coming up, and we'll start to get some more system-wide views. But I think what we've realized is our internal maturity, you know, operational excellence model is still valuable because there are things you want to emphasize in terms of your particular space, your customers, your operations that are particular to, you know, how you operate, and those can be complementary to the feedback you get about your broader systems and processes. And so I think it's a natural evolution. What you're describing makes sense, and I think the success for this in industry will be for the ability to realize how these coexist and make those adjustments, you know, so that you're getting the best overall snapshot of your particular operations unique to, you know, what you do in the healthcare space.
I think just to add, I think that's really the, from a lot of the feedback we've gotten and received and some of the interactions we've had, that's really been where it's driven the most success, is when it becomes an input into your own improvement efforts and your own process, your own strategy. It really works well. That's really what it's intended to be. I go back to the idea that even our 483 observations, their observations are intended to help you guide and address things. I know that's not how they get taken. I know that there's some work that happens there. I get that. But this gives you a little bit of a different flavor and feel to that, and the ability to incorporate that into that strategy. So you've got the priority associated with it, right? It isn't all things must be done. Everything's not necessarily equal. You get to choose what's going to give you the bigger impact based on your decision, and that makes the improvements, I think, a little bit more sustainable. So I think that that's where we see the best application of it, the best alignment. Nina, to your point, appreciate the going out and spreading the message. I think that's something that we can probably be a little bit better about. I don't know if, you know, when we were earlier stages in the pilot phases, we were at the mode of, you know, we were still learning, getting the insights, getting a more proactive, targeted message out to that community yet, but maybe it's something to start thinking about there.
And maybe this wasn't really emphasized at any point, but I want to emphasize it now, that CMMI is intended to help organizations build up their structural capabilities so that they can identify those issues and address them quickly on their own, more independently. So it's great to hear that Bausch is doing that and Edwards is doing that, and other organizations as well.
Perfect, thank you. And with that, we're right on time for lunch. Unless someone has another question they want to get in, we're ready for lunch. All right, go ahead. You got it. Okay.
So it's a two-part question, right? So I'm going to go back to what Kim said earlier around the benefits. So two parts question, but it's related to the sustainability. As this program, wanting to understand from an FDA perspective, we heard about the benefits that FDA has gotten from the proof of concept. So Cisco, from your perspective, as this becomes the program, from a benefits perspective, how does FDA see the benefits growing, or how does that model is being envisioned?
So I think that's something that we'll probably get into also in some of the discussions later. I think ideally what we'd like to do and have the opportunity to do with this is collectively look at the way we do oversight very differently, right? The approaches in terms of, again, the window into how organizations are doing the work, how it integrates into the business. It's very different than the normal one we have. It is a different level of confidence. We've tried to bring out review teams, right, to go and participate with some of the sites who've been there and are willing to kind of, be open to FDA and, not have a fearful reaction there. And it changes the perspective, right? They see what we're talking about in action, which is a very different lens than what they normally get. That helps really clarify why we're making the changes in some of our, modifications that we're looking to do. We need to. There's just no way to sustain the level of current activity given the rate of change that's going on in the industry, some of the other issues that are happening, the new technology increases, the growing, product demand, the growing companies across the world. We need to look at things differently. I think what we have and what we can do with this and what we can do with some of the data focuses later we'll talk about is rethink how we do the work. Now, what we've seen is when we do that, that turns into a benefit. So to the point that was made beforehand, right, there is a situation where we can do a win-win-win here for everyone. So I see the evolution going really based off of the willingness of the other side to help address the information need we have or the safety concern or anything on that end. We are open, and what we're trying to do with all this is say we are open to a different and better way of doing this. Help us figure out what those are, and we can move forward from there. And that, I think, is where you start to drive this shift in the benefits and modifications.
Okay. So my other question is very related to this one is, from an operational standpoint, as the program pilot transitions to program, there's still, even in the pilot phase, it sounds like there's still a lot of resources involved in terms of doing appraisal. So as you hoping to exponentially grow the membership for the VIP, how are we positioned to plan for that resources, right? Resources bump in terms of appraisal. Is there a model that VIP can learn from that has been successful in the past doing this type of activities?
I was going to say there's the potential for MDSAP, but that's it's still a different model that opened up to a much broader base of appraisals and organizations to be able to do the work. I'd be remiss in saying that we've got an answer to that because it's not the case, right? It's something that we've really got, if we want to put it on a triangle somewhere, just to make sure we're keeping track of it. We're aware that it's something we have to be really cognizant of. And even just from an FDA standpoint, right, we want to be able to manage the scale coming in. If this turned on immediately tomorrow, we would be the gate, right? Our systems are not necessarily geared up to that. Our training to look at things indifferently would need to shift. So it is a situation where as we roll out into a program, we want to be measured in the rollout, especially in the initial phases, so that we set it up to succeed. It really is one that if we don't do that right, we tip into a scale that will cause a lot of other issues and things will stop if it's not seen as functional.
One thing I would add to that, and we've seen this in the pilot, and this is a good example to me of where this being a more collaborative program has a lot of benefits, in that we recognize there were going to be some challenges with that. And so companies individually can get their own internal resources trained and certified or I'm using the wrong word there. I'm sure Kim will correct me later, but essentially to be internal ATMs. And so we're able to not only help ourselves be much more aware and educated and understanding some of the best practices, some of the thought behind the feedback we're getting, but it also provides capacity to balance out the number of appraisers that are independent lead appraisers. And so we can work those together. But that was an adjustment and the program made through discussion and recognizing this was coming up. So I would encourage people to make those investments, not only for your own benefit, but also to help the program scale up.
And just to add one more thing, and I think this goes back to maybe some of the working groups you're going to talk about later, Kim. We knew that at some point in time this is going to start to be an issue. As companies are engaged, they are pushing themselves into more mature capabilities or expanding the capability areas. One, second year, third year, one of the things that comes up to mind is those second, third year appraisals. What do we do, right? How do we move those out? How do we give the bigger breathing room, use that capacity elsewhere, but maintain visibility or oversight through maybe the data or what's coming in, which is where that performance measure stuff starts to get more, to be a little bit more important. So it's the idea that, again, those are problems. We know they're there. Collectively, we can come up with a solution. We're open to some of that methodology and approach, right? If you're going higher in maturity and you're sharing, those metrics and they're giving us a good indication of your control, maybe we go 2, 3 years. Maybe we shift the idea of the quarterly engagement. It's really a situation where it's going to be very dependent on your willingness and response on that end too, from an organizational standpoint.
So just to echo that, I think Rob and Cisco mentioned that there are ways that we can continue that we can expand our existing capacity by having internal team members within organizations, by looking at the way that we do appraisals in the long term. As I mentioned earlier, Cmmi helps organizations become more independent in that way. And, the more change there is, then you might want to reevaluate against the model. But I think other ways that we're considering this is, we've looked at our existing appraiser set and what our total capacity could be, but we need to do it in a balanced way with SBA and with industry so that we're meeting the demand collectively together. If we grow too fast, that poses a risk. Grow too slow, that poses a risk. And we're also looking at long-term, there are tens of thousands of manufacturers all over the world. So long-term, how do we continue to build that pipeline to support those needs?
I'll keep going. I know you want to end very quickly. I think it goes back to just governance. There's a lot of things you're talking about, and you have a governance committee. It needs to become operational. There needs to be things that are brought before them, and small P policy kind of direction just needs to be put forward. So there's a path that all the stakeholders agree to, and you can start executing against those policies.